Good afternoon and welcome to today's Planning Committee. This is not a public meeting, but a meeting the public can attend. I'm Councillor Susan Durant, Chair of Planning Committee. Before we commence, I'd like to outline the domestic arrangements for the meeting. We are not expecting a fire practice today. If the alarm sounds, please leave the building by way of the fire exit through the doors at the rear of the chamber on my right. When you've left the chamber, proceed down the stairway and exit through the emergency exit on the ground floor. If there is anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located, and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the lift doors to call for assistance. The designated assembly point is in the public square in front of CAS beyond the fountain. I'd like to inform members of the public and press that today's meeting is being visually and audio recorded. By entering the council chamber, you accept that you will be recorded and your images retained and broadcast by the council on its website and on YouTube. If anyone intends to record or film any part of today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting and you only focus on recording those people participating. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent mode. May I remind anyone speaking in the meeting that you will need to press the large red button underneath the microphone and ensure the light is illuminated. That will ensure that you are being recorded. The meeting is proceeding today on the basis that all members of the committee have read their agenda papers thoroughly and are aware of what they will be considering today. If any members of the committee leave the chamber during consideration of an application, they should ensure they do not take part in the vote on their return, as they will not have heard all the relevant information to that particular item. Thank you. Item 1 is apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from Councillor Andy Pickering, Amy Dixon and Duncan Anderson. Are there any other apologies? Thank you. Item 2 is exclusion of the press and public, and there are no exempt items today. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No, thank you. So item 4 is the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 30th of April 2024. Can the minutes be moved as a true and accurate record, please? And is that seconded? And is that agreed? Thank you. Item 5. So we now come to the schedule of application. Application number 1 is planning application 24/00321/FUL. It's for a change of use from a dwelling house, C3, to children's residential care home, C2, with associated internal and external alterations, including installation of new first floor side window at Glenamoy, Hickleton Street in Denby, Maine. Susie Boyce is the planning case officer that will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is a deferred item from the last Planning Committee. The reasons for deferral, first of all, for a member's site visit to assess the site context. This took place on this Friday last at 10 a.m. And then also to seek input from Children's Services Officers Rhiannon Nelson and Damien Allen. We have received comments from Lee Goltz, who's a Service Director in Partnerships, Early Intervention and Localities. This was made on behalf of Rhiannon Nelson, who was on leave at that time, but also in consultation with Damien Allen. So those comments are summarised in the updated committee report that is before you. In terms of a few pre-committee amendments, things to bring to your attention, we've had 3 requests to speak. First of all, we've got Diane Worthington and Mike Worthington, who will speak on behalf in support of the application. We have Mrs. Dawn Lawrence speaking as a member of the public in opposition, and we have Councillor Ian Pearson speaking in opposition to the application as well as ward councillor. We have also received a number of pieces of additional material, first of all from the applicant. This consisted of 4 sets of PowerPoint slides containing training material for Friends Together Care Homes. That's covering the issues mentioned on screen here, so advanced safer caring and risk management, child criminal exploitation, child sexual exploitation and missing from care. Due to some of the sensitive nature of this training material, that has been circulated to committees only. A copy of their training matrix, which contains a list of all the different pieces of training that staff get, has also been circulated. That is also available on public access. An example of a completed risk assessment has also been provided and circulated to committee. From a member of the public, we've also had, first of all, 2 photos showing young people gathering at Hickleton Street. It's also worth mentioning that Mrs Lawrence also provided 2 videos. However, for various reasons, including practical and safeguarding reasons, these could not be put in the public domain or shared internally. So very briefly, these are the photos that Mrs Lawrence has provided. Before I start properly introducing the application, I just want to address a couple of points that were raised at the last planning committee by members of the public or by ward councillors. So first, there was a query raised about the consultation and publicity that had been undertaken for the application. And so just to clarify that, as is the standard procedure with applications of this type, all neighbours who share an adjoining boundary or immediately opposite the site were sent a neighbour notification letter. When this was queried during the application, we did check internally that yes, these letters had been generated and sent out. The properties that received a letter are shown in the light blue squares on that image on the screen there. However, as an additional measure, we did also post a site notice for a period of 21 days. That was posted on the 4th of April. That additional consultation period expired on the 25th of April, and all comments received in response to that were summarised and reported to the 30th of April Planning Committee. So just to clarify, all of our statutory consultation and publicity duties have been met, and the site notice means that we have gone above and beyond in that respect. That's just the site notice. Okay, right, I will now just briefly summarise the application site, as we have had a committee member change since the last application. So the application site is a 2-storey detached dwelling at Hickleton Street. Here on the photos we have the front elevation. You can see off-street parking there, free parking spaces at the front of the property. And then at the back there, that's the back elevation. That photo is taken from the rear alleyway. At the back of the site, there's a block of 3 garages. The middle garage belongs to the application site. And yes, there is also an internal garage in the property. Now, as part of the proposed development, there are going to be some internal reconfiguration works. That is to convert the internal garage into an office for staff. It's also proposed to insert a new first floor side window at the right hand side of that picture there to create a window for a staff sleep-in room. A few pictures of the surrounding areas. So this is Hickleton Street. So you can see mix of properties, detached properties to the left, bungalows to the right. And that's just facing the opposite way down Hickleton Street. Got a local shop at the corner of Hickleton Street. These photos were provided by Councillor Ball to the last committee. And a disused garage at Hickleton Street and nearby disused community centre. Again, photos provided by Councillor Ball. So in terms of the proposed site layout, as mentioned, 3 parking spaces at the front. There's a garage at the back which is going to be retained. This doesn't quite meet the space requirements to be counted as a garage. but the highways officer is satisfied with the parking levels provided at the front there. Cycle parking will be provided at the rear. Details of this are being secured by condition, and bin storage will be at the rear and side of the property. These are the proposed layout plans. As you can see, at the first floor there'll be 4 bedrooms. The 4th bedroom is going to be a staff sleep-in room, and this is the room that the new first floor side window will be provided for. That's also proposed to be subject to a condition that it's obscure glazing and restricted opening to secure neighbouring amenity. So the main considerations of the application are crime and fear of crime. The application was called into committee by Councillor Ball due to concerns relating to crime in the area and the vulnerability of children in the home to being groomed by local gangs or other antisocial behaviour concerns. Residential amenity, we had a neighbouring objection about the impact of overlooking from the new first floor side window, and also parking as well. So in respect of these issues, I won't go into too much detail because we did discuss this in quite a lot of detail at the last committee. In terms of crime and the fear of crime, the police liaison officer initially put in an objection, but after receiving further confirmation related to procedures in terms of if children go missing, agreement to implement physical security measures, and also confirmation of the various management and training procedures to be put in place, he was content to withdraw his objection, and so there is no longer an objection from the police liaison officer. Just skip through these. Points as well. In terms of residential amenity, I've already mentioned those. This is the proposed layout, internal layout, and parking as well. Yes, it's worth clarifying in terms of the parking spaces proposed. There's no more than 3 staff are going to be on site at any one time, which is one of the reasons the highways officer was content with the level of parking proposed. Okay, so yeah, just to conclude, the application is recommended for approval. This is on the basis that adequate procedures and training can be put in place to mitigate the risk of crime and the fear of crime. There's no overlooking or loss of privacy to neighbouring properties. Parking is satisfactory. Internal and external layout doesn't raise any concerns that cannot be mitigated through planning conditions. So yes, approve subject to conditions is the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. We've got Mrs. Dawn Lawrence, who is a member of the public who has requested to speak in opposition to the application. Would you like to come down to your seat? This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you're ready and want to speak, and again to mute the microphone when you've concluded your submission, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. Chair and committee members, we heard the concerns of residents at the last meeting regarding the unsuitable environment of the site for the children's residential care home. These have been further magnified by a live petition which has been signed by all residents living on the street and adjoining streets. To quote a couple, vulnerable children and adults should be housed in areas with more positive opportunities. Antisocial hotspot, not suitable area to place vulnerable children. Not a nice area for children, full stop. I won't allow my child to go to the shop because of the street troubles. The petition has enabled residents to discuss unreported issues of burglary, assault, ASB and victims of various doorstop scammers, where they have been too frightened to report for the fear of repercussion that this would bring. Some members, including the chair, undertook a site visit to view the site and the surrounding environment and the aesthetics of the area, which on the day gave a quiet picture. The time of the visit was 10 o'clock. What it did not give was the daily activity evidenced on the footage sent in, which to the planning committee, which I know we're unable to share and show. But this footage and the pictures is daily activity from tea time onwards of the street and young people who frequent there, with their loud music, off-road biking, foul language and littering behaviours that we would not want our children to get involved in. We heard from Mrs Worthington at the last meeting that her staff have appropriate training to work with children in the placement, and that's not what's at question here. However, it does not and cannot stretch beyond the placement. When establishing under a contextual safeguarding lens, when we're establishing homes for children in the care of the local authority, apart from the placement itself and the infrastructure of staffing and policies and procedures that we know will be followed, we must consider the surroundings and the environment where the children will play, mix with other children in their own surroundings as part of their natural daily living and growing up. Our ask of residents, of the committee and chair, is now that you've seen and heard for yourselves the concerns for the vulnerability of the children, if placed in this site, is this appropriate environment that you would choose for your child to live and grow up in? Thank you, Chair and Committee.
Thank you for that, Mrs Lawrence. Do any committee members have any questions that they would like to ask? No? Thank you very much for your submission. Councillor Ian Pearson is the ward member as requested to speak in opposition of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you have concluded your submission, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. I don't intend to go through what my colleague Nigel Ball said to you, nor what you said and saw while you were actually on the site visit. I'm much more concerned about what's not been said. The lack of a true impact assessment. There is no cumulative impact assessment. The police have done a scant report, not a mention of the Denby riot squad, nor the Pitsmoor Shutter Boys, or anything else to do with county lines, yet it stares them in the face, and they have mounted many operations in and around this area over the last several years, leading to numerous arrests. Yet we have an application to put yet another 4 children into the middle of it. Again, there is no report on where the other homes are located, nor where there are paedophiles or people on the sex register in location adjacent to the site. For many years, there's been a call to have at least 1,000 feet from any home, from any of these sites or other houses of multiple occupancy for safeguarding reasons. We are well aware of how deprived Denby is, being the second worst within the area of Doncaster City. Yet, we look around, where is the play equipment? Where is the outdoor space that exists for any child, let alone a looked after child, within this deprived area? Everybody is aware there is a total lack of play equipment and services for young people. This is not an environment that I would suspect that you would want to bring up a child. Yet, here we have people wishing to bring more children in to that sort of circumstances. All of the paperwork and the training schedule, it's wonderful until the manager leaves or something goes wrong, because we all know that there's a lack of reporting and there is no way to report to the owners within the proposed procedures. The people that should be record keeping should be the owners and not the manager, who may change quite often. Also, we need, and as Dawn's just mentioned, it's amazing how much information has come about from local residents about the fears they have of reporting because of the existence of the gangs already operating in the area, that at the moment they won't report for a fear of reprisal yet. Here we have somebody again who already has one site very close that at its opening created massive mayhem in the local area. So I'm somewhat surprised at the police's attitude. It's something that I'll take up outside this meeting.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask you to, before you do anything, actually look how many homes are already in the area. This area is swamped with homes, yet the facilities do not exist. Committee, please reject this application and suggest a better way forward for all homes that have been suggested in Conisbrough and Dennerby. Thank you, Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Do we have any questions for Councillor Pearson? No? Thank you for your submission. We now have Mrs. Diane Worthington and Mr. Mike Worthington, who have requested to speak in support of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak, and again to mute the microphone when you've concluded your submission, and I'll let you know when there's 1 minute remaining.
Okay, before I start, can I just let you know that recently I've just been diagnosed with silent reflux, so if I start coughing, I will be okay. I just need to take some water, so just be patient with me if that's okay. Right, so I'd like to share some information with you. A planning application was approved in November 2023 for a residential care home to be opened in Dennerby, which would look after up to 7 children. This was approved with no objections from any members of the public or from any members of the councillors that were on site. The only objection was from the Highways Department. This application wasn't sent to a planning committee meeting like both of ours have been, and yet we've got experience of running homes in the local area. The location of the home that was approved in 2023 was brought up in our previous application in 2015 as being an area of concern. So I'm very surprised that none of the local councillors objected to this application, yet have objected to ours. This approach seems quite unusual. We've clearly demonstrated that we can manage risk. This is evident by the fact that our home, which is just 2 streets away from Glenamoy, has been judged as good in all areas, including safeguarding. This was during a time when a home run by the local authority had to close because they couldn't mitigate those risks. I would also like to give you some information about how we're regulated as well. As a minimum, Ofsted inspections happen annually. We have a 2-day in-depth inspection where they scrutinise all young people's files. Our inspections are not like the ones that either a school, a local authority or a large company have. We don't get any notice when an inspection is to happen. All Ofsted visits to the home are unannounced and all files are inspected in depth. That's for every young person, whether they're still in the home or whether they've left. We must always make sure that we provide the best possible care we can. We manage risks and we keep the young people safe. This is a priority for us. If there was something that we weren't doing that we should be doing, initially Ofsted would grade us as inadequate. If it continued and we didn't implement change, we'd be inspected on a more frequent basis, and if we didn't improve, we would be closed down. We also have a monthly independent inspection known as a Regulation 44 visit. This is where an independent inspector comes to the home and goes through all the young people's files in detail. They question social workers, family members, and the people that we care for. A report is generated and sent to Ofsted each month. If this report highlighted a serious issue that we're not dealing with correctly, then Ofsted will initially question us, and then they would prioritise an unannounced visit sooner rather than later. The local authority complete regular compliance monitoring visits. The last one was very favourable, and information from this was shared with you at the last meeting. Prior to this meeting, I have sent in for you to review a risk assessment template which describes in detail the proactive, active and reactive interventions, so you're able to see what we do to keep our young people safe. I've also provided you with details of our training matrix, which shows the training we provide to all our staff, and you've received a sample of the training we provide. Hopefully, this shows you how thorough we are in providing a training and support to staff so they're equipped to deal with situations that may arise. We have supported over 20 young people since opening in 2016. I believe the work we do is good, and I already believe that we can continue this in another home. There will be risks in any location, and it is down to us to manage those risks effectively. You can see from the matching process that we do that we don't just allow any young person to move into one of our homes without due diligence. We match each young person with the people who already live at the home. We match them with staff, as in the experience the staff have in dealing with particular risks. And we also match the young person to the area and the risks that they may bring. It's a lengthy process which we monitor regularly over a 6-month period. Now, changes have taken place to legislation concerning the placement of looked after children, their location and how best services should meet their needs.
1 minute remaining.
The government are supporting the development of local services for the authorities to prevent young people from being placed a long way from home. Ideally, they should be placed within a 20-mile radius. This home would meet that criteria. I'm asking you not to vote against this application today because there are professionals that have looked at this that want it to go ahead. I wouldn't have invested so much time, effort and money into this project if I did not truly believe that we can make the home a success. We have mitigated the same risks in this area for over 8 years. You put your faith in us in 2015 when Councillor Bull raised concerns then, and we've proved that you were right to approve that application then. So please put your faith and confidence in us again, and we won't let you or the people of Doncaster down.
Thank you for that submission. Committee members, do we have any questions that we would like to ask? Councillor Sophie Lou.
Hello, I want to ask you, do you allow the young people to go to the local shop by themselves, or you always have the care to accompany with them? Thanks.
It depends on the young person. Some people may be with staff all the time. We tend to find that the young people don't really go out and socialise in the local area. The hotspots where we are would be at the Tom Hill Youth Centre or at the market, and we've had no instances of antisocial behaviour there. We also tend to find that looked after children tend not to go out and socialise in the community. They'll tend to make friends and have the friendships with people wherever they're from. So if they're from, say, Scorthorpe, they'll tend to retain the friendships that they have in that area, because a lot of people feel that there's a stigma attached to being a looked after child.
Thank you for that. Do you have another question?
No, I don't have a. Thank you for the answer.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other councillor wishing to ask a question? Councillor John Mamsey.
Yeah, can you bear with me, Chair, because this is my first time on this committee, brand new onto it. I would just like to ask Mrs Worthington, please. My colleague, Councillor Ian Pearson, raised the issue about, if I'm treading old ground, please stop me, Chair, because I wasn't at the first meeting of this committee, right, about this. But Councillor Pearson said that, mentioned other homes in the area. Are you aware of how many homes there are?
No, I'm not aware of how many homes. We have one in Denby already and one in Mexborough. I know that there was the one that I've stated that was approved in November 2023 that didn't go to planning committee or anything. And I know there were 2 approved, I believe, that again, Councillor Pearson or Councillor Bull didn't raise any objections to for Conisborough.
Thank you for that. Do you have any other questions, Councillor Mamsey?
Yes, Chair, just if please tell me if I'm stepping out of order here. I'm looking at page 17, the South Yorkshire Police on 710, paragraph 710. And part down there starts, South Yorkshire Police have a number of reported incidents where children are looked after care with fewer or less complex issues who have fallen to prey to the influence of local youth in Denby, Maine, and become involved in criminal behaviour. This has resulted in vulnerable children and young people becoming victims or leading them committing crime on behalf of local gangs. Yet on page 11, by going back to 5.7, paragraph 5.7 is quite explicit there. To reduce vulnerability and resilience. I have a dilemma, Chair, with this, but if, like my colleague Councillor Ian Pearson says there, the police objected in the first place, what was the reason they withdrew it from? Do we know?
What we can do, Councillor Mousey, it can go when we go into debate. The officer can go through that again because they did put forward some proposals for to be adhered to address those concerns. So when we go into the debate side, that will be reiterated by the officer for you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just speak? I believe some of that was around the way that we handle our young people in the home at Denby. Some homes that I know of, they can be wherever in the country, don't tend to go looking for children if they go missing. They don't have robust safety plans in place. They don't have robust risk assessments. And when the police reviewed how we manage our other home, they had no concerns because we don't call the police out for them to look for children. We don't have issues like that. And can I just say that not one child that we've ever looked after has got into antisocial behaviour and criminal exploitation in Denby.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions from councillors? Thank you for your submission, Mrs Worthington. Committee members, we're now going to go into debate. So does any member wish to comment on the report or ask the case officer a question? Councillor Beach.
Thank you. Susie, could you put the map up again where you showed where people have been notified? Yes. Now, the turquoise dots are where people have had letters, I get. The red triangles, what do they denote? Because there's one next door, but one further down, and two on a...
So yeah, those show where objections have come from.
Ah, I see. Yeah, yeah. And all the blue dots are just...
Those just show that there is an address there.
There's an address there. I see. Yes, thank you. I just wondered if any of them donated where there, perhaps were people who were being watched, shall we say? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Beach. Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to get some clarification because I think we from the last meeting we didn't have comments made from senior officers, and we now have. Just to confirm, every senior officer involved with looked after children within the council infrastructure has all approved and are happy with the proposals. So I'm a bit surprised that I'm very surprised some of the things I've heard today, which seem to borderline scaremongering, inaccurate information, and downright rubbish. So I just want to confirm.
Stapleton, I think that's a fair comment. Can we please look at the language being used?
Well, that's just my opinion, Chair. I think some of the things I've heard
to make comments as well, so please don't be detrimental.
Yeah, I'm just saying some of the things I've heard I just find ridiculous. So I just want to confirm that all senior officers that are responsible for the looked after children, including our chief exec, have all actually looked at this and said they're happy with it and they support it, and commissioning and support it, etc.
Yeah, that's correct. None have raised any objections. It's also worth highlighting that we do have two officers from Children's Services here today. So Kerry Blake and Katrina Yates, so they can answer any detailed questions if needed.
Yeah, thank you. I just looking at this and just thinking to myself, what is the reason for objections? Because it doesn't seem to me to appear to be anything material planning. And when we've got senior officers that are paid substantial amounts of money to do their job, seem to be doing their job properly here. So it's like, where are these objections? What's motivating the objections? It certainly, to me, doesn't feel like it's the for the interest of the looked after children. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hogarth and Councillor Cox.
Yeah, my worry is that we're putting vulnerable children into an area that has got a lot of problems. And I just, how would you feel that, children's services officers would put it, if you put your children in that area, would you feel safe with them?
We have a really robust process, and I can only comment from a commissioning perspective on that. But we carry out a lot of checks. I believe this has been shared with the committee previously. We track all of the responses. We consult with planning. We look at all the police comments. We also speak to our communities colleagues. But our comments usually are with the provider. So, for example, we look at the provider and whether they're Ofsted good or better. We look at any experience we've got them, and we also look at the need for the children. And I think the children aren't just placed because it's an open provision. They're placed there based on a really rigorous matching process, and Katrina is probably better to explain that to you.
Yeah, so I can just come in there and say, obviously being the manager of the placements team, which is my job to make sure all our young people and children are safe and well and placed in the right provision. We have a referral that goes out, which is around the young person, and then when we get offers come in, we look at that young person, obviously look at their risks or behaviours before we place and see if it's a good match. Yes, some of our children are vulnerable, like any child, my own child, any looked after child the same, and we would take into account all that, and we don't, as Kerry said, just place a child because it's a provision that has a spare bed, if you like, and just looking from what we have, obviously Doncaster children, as the provider said, not just that provider, but any provider, it should stay in Doncaster is a big belief where possible, if that's the safe place for them to be.
I'm going to fetch Emma in as well now.
Just very briefly, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify to the committee that the question you were asked by one of the speakers around would you place one of your children in this area isn't the question you should be turning your minds to in making the planning decision. It's about whether the use of the property is acceptable in planning terms when you're looking at all of the relevant policies and alongside all of that other regulatory context that we're required to assume is going to operate correctly. Thank you.
Before I fetch Councillor Cox in, Councillor Mounsey, I believe it was, asked a question about the number of homes in the vicinity. Do we have that information to hand while you're looking to see if you have? I'll fetch Councillor Cox in.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very simple one. It's to officers. They're chattering now. Are you happy with this application and with this site for young people?
From our commissioning perspective, yes.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions from the committee? No? Have you been able to check that information just requested?
Chair, it's not information that we do hold, but what I would say is that the policies governing these kind of uses don't, in the same way as HMOs, for example, say that you can't have a certain number above, so it wouldn't be the same consideration as when you get those kind of applications. It's each case on its own merits and determining in accordance with the policies that are in place on that basis.
I think our children's services officers have something to add.
Yeah, so I can just add a little bit. I can't give you the figure of the homes that are in Conisbrough Denby, but I can tell you that currently we have one child placed in that area, as in Conisbrough Denby Main, just one in a residential.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions? Therefore, is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to conditions? Is there a mover for the recommendation? That's been moved by Councillor Steve Cox. Is there a seconder for the application? That's been seconded by Councillor Gary Stapleton. Can we have a show of hands of those in favour of the application, please? That's 5. We've got 5 people in favour. Those against? Therefore, the application has been passed, subject to conditions. Thank you for that. Item 6 on the agenda is Doncaster Council adoption of Rural Development Supplementary Planning Document. This report is for noting only. Dave Edwards, the Principal Planning Officer, will introduce this item. David.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, as Councillor has just said, this is to bring to your attention that the Rural Development Supplementary Planning Document was adopted at the end of last month. So this report is just for noting. It's essentially saying that this supplementary planning document can be used to determine planning applications. It can be used in committee reports and in case officers deciding applications. So supplementary planning documents, what are they? They're not policy. This document is not introducing any new policy. It's just giving advice or guidance, an interpretation, if you like, on how the council should interpret both national and local planning policy, specifically in the area of rural development. So that includes policies for countryside, policy area in the borough, and green belts. Doncaster, outside of the built-up areas, is divided into what's called green belt, which is broadly to the west of the borough, where we apply national policy, essentially from the National Planning Policy Framework. But to the east of the borough, we have countryside policy area, which isn't green belt. It's a bit more lenient towards development, and we've actually got some specific policies in the local plan which guide applications in that area. So members may recall that last year we adopted 4 other supplementary planning documents in a similar fashion, and there was a previous to that, there was one on biodiversity and net gain. So this is part of a series, and there's expected to be a couple more coming on. So this, as I said, this supports and builds upon local plan policies, and these include policies such as Policy 8 of the local plan, which is how applications to remove occupancy conditions on rural dwellings be removed. Conditions can be imposed on dwellings that limit residency to particular people in agriculture, for example, or rural businesses, and they can be removed. And that policy provides the policy in which is used to assess applications, and this SPD gives more detail on how that can be assessed. There's also further guidance in this SPD on gypsies, travellers and travelling show people in the countryside policy area. And, well, I'll say the bulk of the document is talking about Policy 25, which is the specific policy for development in the countryside policy area. It's split into 4 parts. So it's got parts which address, for example, new buildings in the countryside policy area, replacement dwellings, and proposals for sort of non-residential uses, employment uses, commercial uses. The document was subject to consultation, so we wrote to agents specifically, planning agents, parish councils, and did social media posts. The consultation was in line with the statement of community involvement, which all planning documents have to be prepared against. We got some response, not a great amount of response, but only 11 responses, but it's par for course really for this type of documents, mostly from planning agents, some bodies, sort of environmental statutory undertakers such as the Environment Agency, Natural England, and we did get one comment from a member of the public. The document has been amended in parts in response to those consultation comments. Not significantly, it has to be said, but some wording changes were made and felt to improve the document itself. This SPD and the other 5 SPD that have been adopted so far, they are replacing former SPD which supported the old UDP and core strategy. There is a transitional development guidance which is covering up or mopping up the parts from those SPDs which will be replaced by SPD in due course. So the recommendation is to note the report, to note the fact that the supplementary planning document has been adopted and it can now be used as a material consideration for determining relevant planning applications. Thank you.
Thank you for that, David. Councillor Cox.
Thank you. Could I ask why Planning Committee weren't consulted on it? And obviously we know that, I mean, I went through core strategy, UDP, I had most of them off by heart, and I welcomed local plan. But obviously, I mean, we know that it is a ever-moving document, if you like. But we see other ones such as floodwater assessments. We see water that could be used within the local plan to either support or aid officers in making a decision whether a document should be put forward or not. But that, when I've asked previously whether that can also be within the local plan as a decision-making document, I've been told no. I mean, surely, obviously this way we're rural, it would, I would have thought, affect some of the land usage that's already within the local plan. Now, can we have the water stuff in it? And do we just continue, or when are we going to see a new local plan, and or are we just going to keep sellotaping bits into it? Thank you.
Just to clarify what you mean by water, do you mean flood risk? Okay. Well, there is existing policy in the local plan which covers flood risk. So it's been adopted and it's been used for a couple of years now. And one of the SPDs that was adopted last year, that covers flood risk. So that gives like the more detail, if you like, on how to implement the policy in the local plan, and also national policy. In terms to why planning committee weren't specifically consulted, it's just part of the way that these SPDs have been approved and adopted. All members were consulted on the documents. It's just that the procedure has felt that it be approved basically at officer level and be reported back to this committee.
Does any other member wish to ask a question? Therefore, committee, we move that the note the contents of the report and to note that the Rural Development Supplementary Planning document was adopted on 24th of April and it's now a material consideration when determining planning applications. Is that agreed? Agreed? Thank you. Thank you for that, David. Item 7 is appeal decision. This report is for information only. Does any member wish to speak on this item? Therefore, can I ask committee to move that the report be noted? And is that agreed? Thank you. Item 8 is Planning Enforcement Quarter 4 report, the 1st of January to the 31st of March 2024. Again, this report is for information only. We have Emma Keefe, who is the Development Team Manager, that is going to introduce this item. Just one moment, please, Emma. Councillor Hogarth. Right, if we let Emma do a report first, then please, Councillor Hogarth.
I'm going to say very little about the report itself this afternoon, other than you can see what's before you in terms of the detail, and happy to answer any questions that you might have on any of those sites, or take away anything to discuss with colleagues that I'm not able to answer this afternoon.
Thank you for that, Emma. So we'll start with Councillor Hogarth.
Yeah, on page 199, the first page of the report, total cases still under investigation, 360. Cases recorded in this quarter, 120. And then cases closed, 89. So we've lost, there's 31. Is that normal? Is it going to keep going up each month, or are we ever going to get the figures down?
So you generally get peaks and troughs with the number of enforcement cases that come into us and how quickly we're able to make those investigations and bring them to conclusion. So it's very much case dependent on how long things take, depending on the intricacies of the investigation. So you will quite often see more complaints come in that are answered. It's because there's kind of a rolling investigation on various things going on at any one time, and they're all at different stages at the process at any one time too.
So, can we take it that, is this 360 a peak? What's the trend been like? You know, the cases outstanding. If we go back a while, has the trend been up and down, or has it been steadily rising?
I can go away and find that information out for you, and perhaps for the next report to Planning Committee we include some more statistics along those lines in addition to the other information. I'm sure we can pull that for you.
Councillor Cox.
Could you also look at times when we're seeing peaks and troughs? Because I know from our warders reporting incidents in, officers it seems to be annual leave, no response. Then we get a response. Then and obviously there's a lack of officers there.
Yep, absolutely, can pick that up for you.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any other committee member wishing to speak? Okay, therefore can I ask committee members to move that the report be noted? And is that agreed? Thank you. Members, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business at today's meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and input, and I now declare the meeting closed.